Hello Red Bank, my name is Michael. I'm a planner in City Hall. I am on Dayton Boulevard at the south end of the city right now because I wanted to show you some of the changes that TDOT is about to make to Dayton Boulevard. I'll orient us in this video starting at the Stringers Ridge Tunnel, and towards the bottom left of the screen is Cherokee to Chattanooga, and to the top right, Dayton to Red Bank. If we zoom in, just past the tunnel, about 30 yards or so, is the city limit of Red Bank. Here's the city limit sign just outside the tunnel. As you come out of the tunnel, it's 2 lanes, but pretty quickly as you start to come down the hill, it turns into 4 lanes. This creates some interesting road context because for drivers coming off of Ashmore, which is to the right, or Frontage Road, which is to the upper left, you have to navigate 4 lanes of traffic if you're turning onto Dayton. Of course, we want moderate speeds, but because we have these 2 other lanes, we see a lot of vehicles that are speeding up to pass each other. It creates 2 hazardous intersections for drivers. This area is one of the higher frequency collision locations in the city, so for a long time these conditions needed to be addressed. If you continue, the road really narrows here, and what we're really afraid of is when people are walking or biking at this section, that they're going to get clipped by a car. Here's just an example of some kids riding up the road. Maybe they're going to Coolidge, maybe they're going to the aquarium, but clearly some really dangerous scenarios. Some people will walk their bikes on this section because it's so precarious navigating the space as a pedestrian or a bicyclist. And we have seen accidents at this section. Someone was coming around the curve at a moderate speed, but because it's such a tight turn and the road is actually not tilted there, but they went off the side of the road and hit about an 8-foot drop and onto the county property, which is just there off Ashmore. As you continue north on Dayton, you'll pass under the 27 off-ramp, and this is where things get a little convoluted. So what was a 4-lane road will suddenly become a 3.5 to a 2.5 plus the turn lane to get into City Green. You have the 27 off-ramp that's joining, and then as you approach Signal Mountain, you have this 5-lane road configuration. So a lot of lane swapping and changing and merging in a pretty short amount of time, just as you're getting to this commercial area of Red Bank. So now let's go back to the tunnel and see what the road's going to look like after TDOT's finished with their work. The road is 2 lanes when you exit, and then we have this really simple 3-lane road geometry where there's 1 lane of travel in each direction, and then in the middle you have a queuing lane. So instead of tracking 4 different vehicle lanes at 4 different speeds, you at most can just keep an eye on 2 lanes, and if you want to, you can use that middle lane as a queuing space. There is a buffered and exclusive bike lane on each side. So that scenario we saw earlier with those kids biking on the road, we're trying to create a condition where you're not coming within inches of other users. Turning off Ashmore frontage is much less of a hazard. You're not having to navigate a drag strip. And as you approach that railroad bridge, it's certainly not as narrow for cars, cyclists, or pedestrians. As you start to pass under the bridge, you no longer have to navigate a 3-lane to 4-lane, 3.5 with the ramp. But as we approach City Green, we do have that turning in and turning out configuration. As the 27 off-ramp comes together, we do have 2 lanes of travel to the north. But as you approach Signal Mountain Boulevard, it's a much simpler concept. Because TDOT's jurisdiction ends at the traffic signal, Red Bank is performing a project on the north side of the intersection to supplement the state route changes. If you're heading south on Dayton Boulevard, this is what you see. We find traffic in the right lane is stacking because some vehicles are heading south, but others are turning right towards Signal Mountain. With these new signal changes, we're going to make that right lane exclusively right turn, and the center lane is going to be exclusively straight southbound. Here's what the road will look like if you're traveling south on Dayton. Again, the goal here is to maintain a consistent as possible road geometry. There is room for those cyclists we saw earlier, and the traffic pattern doesn't encourage drivers to speed around each other as they try to get on 27 South or beat the other cars to the 2-lane tunnel. We have this 2-lane configuration the whole way with a roomy bike lane. And as you come around the curve, again, you'll use that middle turn lane if you're trying to turn off of Dayton onto frontage, or if you're turning off of Dayton onto Ashmore. I always like to add a bit of historical context, especially since this was a pretty important area in the 20th century. They used to call it Valdo, and the Chattanooga Historic Society has a great collection of photos, and one of them is of a donkey and a cart crossing Stringer's Branch, and that obviously is now just Signal Mountain Boulevard, and we have a bridge that crosses it. Much later in the century, it became home to the beloved Dairy Gold ice cream parlor. In the past 2 years, we've done quite a bit of community engagement, and this part of Red Bank was one that the community really wanted to see more activity in. Be Caffeinated just recently started their bakery here called the Morning Bee. We think there's an underappreciated element of Valdo. It sits between these really beautiful hills, and there's obviously a ton of forest ecology here. And over the past several years, we've heard people say that they would love to see these parts of Red Bank activated. And hopefully this project is going to bring about some conditions so that we can appreciate it a little bit better. As we think about these things as a community, as staff, we would really like to improve our ways of moving through these areas. And that's how we can experience Red Bank as a uniquely beautiful and charming place that everyone has said that they love it for. TDOT has scheduled this work to start on July 20th, 2025. So be on the lookout for road signs, lane closures. Definitely drive safe, bike safe, walk safe, and hopefully see you all soon.